Hello, everyone. It is the 19th of November and time for another edition of Wednesday with Walton and Reis here at thecardinalnation.com in video form and in audio form at the Scoops Sports Network and all your favorite podcast apps. Welcome, Kyle Reis.
Hello, Brian Walton. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. As folks know, we record this on Tuesday evening, and Kyle's enjoying a little bit of his dinner, so please bear with him as he tries to make sure he remains nourished and doesn't pass out during our very important podcast here.
I worked out tonight, Brian. I will pass out.
I did not work out. I just exercised my fingers writing because it seems like that's all I do these days. But hey, that's all good for you because you get to read good stuff about the Cardinals.
Oh,
So
yeah.
let's start with Tuesday's big news. This was the deadline, 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central, was the deadline for teams to add players to the 40-man roster to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. And these are players that were signed either 5 years ago if they were 18 at the time or younger, or 4 years ago if they were 19 or older. And the idea here is that to help players either get onto a 40-man roster, or if they're underappreciated by their organization, it gives another organization a chance to say, hey, I think this guy's good enough to be on my 40-man roster and my 26-man active roster next year. I'm going to take him. And the penalty to return a player if he doesn't make it isn't that high. So teams have to weigh the readiness of a player to contribute at the major league level, because as we talked about last time, there's not a lot of place to hide guys, maybe more in the bullpen than on the position player side. So we tend to see more players on the pitching side taken in Rule 5, but we'll see about that. That draft is coming up at the end of the owners' meetings on the 10th of December is when that draft is going to occur. So the Cardinals had 3 open spots coming into the day. They designated for assignment reliever Jorge Alcala, who came over from the Red Sox in the Steven Matz trade at the deadline. And that wasn't a big surprise. Alcala had an ERA over 5 and might have been non-tendered anyway. So the Cardinals had 4 spots. They took the 4 guys that I think you and I agreed were most likely, Leonardo Bernal and Joshua Baez. By the way, all these guys are at Double-A Springfield, interestingly enough. Leonardo Bernal and Joshua Baez were pretty much locks. I think we agreed to that. And then the question was going to be, if they only could save one pitcher, would they take former first-rounder Cooper Hjerpe, who's coming off Tommy John? Would they take Brycen Mautz, who took a step forward, was an all-star in the Texas League? And because of creating that extra roster spot via moving Alcala off, they were able to protect both. Thoughts?
Yeah, Brian, I think one of the things I'm most surprised by, and maybe not surprised, I don't know if that's really the way of putting it. I think that they made the right choice with the roster decisions that they made. I will say that I think that it's in their best interest to hold on to as many pitchers as they possibly can. So I was a little surprised to see Jorge Alcala was the one. They must feel pretty confident that they can pass him through waivers. Uh, I was surprised that it wasn't Matt Koperniak or Cesar Prieto. No disrespect to them, or Jose Fermin, but I feel like those are the redundancies, and I feel like they have to be a little bit more protective with their pitching. The one guy, again, I don't think it's a surprise.
Kyle, just to interrupt there for just a second. I'm sorry because I don't want to lose the thought, and my attention span is short. Prieto was just added very recently. Both he and Fermin are middle infielders, and we don't know yet what the Cardinals are going to do with infielders. They could easily trade away 2 infielders very, very quickly in Nolan Arenado and Brendan Donovan. So, maybe they're trying to keep a little more infield depth because they don't know what they're going to be doing this year. And certainly pitching is something that they want to add. So they're going to have to create more 40-man roster spot, potentially, depending on, what kind of moves they make, whether it's for major leaguers or for prospects.
Yeah, no, that is a great point. And Brian, interrupt me every time you interrupt. I take a bite of food. So if you interrupt me every 5 seconds, please feel free to. I'm a hungry boy, but yeah. So I would say that was really my main takeaway. I do think that they're going to end up losing Cade Winquist. I really do think that that's the one guy in the organization that some other organization will look at and say, 25 years old, throws the mid to high 90s with 2 actionable off-speed pitches. Like that's the kind of arm that like a team like Milwaukee might take. And of course, it doesn't account for whichever team like Milwaukee might find someone like Connor Thomas. Because a year ago we never thought Connor Thomas would be taken in the Rule 5. So maybe a team finds Pete Hansen and says, "Oh, we'll take Pete Hansen," or somebody's looking for a super utility player that can hit that swings the bat left-handed, they might say, "Oh, Noah Menlinger might be our guy." But other than that, I don't think it's going to be much of an impact.
Well, a year ago in the Connor Thomas isn't exactly the same comparison. And the reason why is that Connor Thomas, number one, had already been on 40 man, taken
Uh,
off. He did have some more exposure, and he was the most valuable pitcher in the Arizona Fall League. So he had a lot of exposure in a broader environment. One of the things I know you're high on Cade Winquist, but I believe you've also mentioned in the past that he doesn't necessarily change speeds well, with his offerings. But maybe, like you said, that he might be a guy that a pitching staff might, take a look at and say, hey, we think we can get this guy to the next step. But is he good enough with no AAA experience and, kind of uneven AA results so far? Is he ready to take that big step, April 1st?
yeah, that and probably not, but that is big stuff, and he's really worked to engineer a curveball and a slider with the organization to to pair with his fastball, and it's just a matter of if an organization thinks that arm can play out of a bullpen. And I do think that you'll find an organization who thinks it. It's just a matter of if they pull the trigger on it. And he's really the only arm. Again, since you kind of laid it out perfectly, arms are more likely to be taken in the Rule 5. Uh, he's really the only arm that has some pretty good arm talent, like the evaluators like to say, that wasn't protected. There's some other good
Well, what
arms,
about
but
what about your man crush, Austin Love?
no,
Come on.
Mr. Love, who I love, and is just full a last name full of pun possibilities, Brian.
We're not going to
Um,
go there. We're not going to go there.
we're gonna try not to go there. I'm working my hardest, but
No, no, I'm going to edit it out, and people will never know.
um, that's a slider more than anything. That's just like a slider, and he has. It's not loud. It's a really good slider, but it's not an elite slider, and it doesn't really pair well with his fastball offerings. It's a good pitch, and he had good results coming off of Tommy John surgery, and he kind of found himself a role in a bullpen, but it doesn't have that high velocity, and he hasn't been stretched back out as a starter. And those are usually the arms that are taken.
And really the only guys that are in the top maybe 10 eligible guys that have significant AAA experience are Max Radjic, who didn't pitch well, when he moved up necessarily, but it was still early. And then
Yeah.
Blaze Jordan, who was productive driving in runs, but hit below the Mendoza line after he joined Memphis. And as you said, Jordan's probably not a guy that a team's going to feel comfortable sticking at the back of their four-man bench. But if he gets to stay at Memphis another year and shows what he can do, maybe he can be the next Matt Adams.
Yeah, there is a handedness issue with him at the plate. There's a concern he's only going to be able to hit one hand. Or, he's not going to swing the bat with one hand, but there's issues against righties. That's I believe, and that's a huge thing. He's not particularly athletic. He doesn't hit for a lot of power for being a first baseman. He's not a really good defensive first baseman. There aren't really a whole lot of things other than a contact tool that a team would take a chance on with somebody like him. So it really is not a concern with him. And it's also the thing where if he is taken, it's not really that big of a deal. It's obviously it's a prospect. You don't want to lose prospect capital, but it's another team's going to have to do a lot of work with him, and he's going to have to buy into that work to become major league accessible.
Yep. All right, let's switch gears. We are now 3 days into our top 50 prospect rollout for 2026. The first article, number 50, we made free so everybody can read it and get a view of the fine prospect capsules that Kyle's writing, the scouting reports. Number 50 is Mason Burns, right-hand reliever. 49, Matthew Miura, and number 48, catcher Ryan Campos. Let's start with Burns. He was a guy that you thought pretty highly of, right?
Absolutely, Brian. I I like the fastball slider combo. He's made some mechanical tweaks to like make himself smooth. And sure, sometimes he falls off to the first base side as a right-handed thrower. Sometimes his balance is a little off, but he has a really like smooth, easy motion, really repeatable delivery. And because of his slider and the way it plays off of his fastball in particular, it's a strikeout pitch. And when you have a righty who's thrown out of the bullpen and has had a lot of success throwing out of the bullpen like that, who found his way to Double A, and granted he got beat around a little bit at Double A, but had some Double A success too. Like,
Oh yeah, he was. I mean, he was great in the playoffs. He saved 2 games, didn't allow a run. So yeah, his first couple of outings, and you got to give the guy a mulligan. in moving up to a new level like that. But when the lights were brightest, Burns did well.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, I think just, one of the things I wrote in the little capsule, Brian, is that it was really fun to start our countdown. And again, to tell the audience, I'm really proud of the way our list came together. Yours and mine combined into one. I think it's a really great list. I think it came together very well. And this is the perfect prospect to start with because it's kind of, he's kind of a perfect example of what the organization has started to draft. He's a 14th round pick, which is exciting. Part of why we do what we do is because everybody's a prospect, and it's fun to highlight these kids. He's from went to Western Kentucky. He's got some, I think, Illinois roots, if I'm remembering correctly, either Indiana or Illinois roots, and it's just a fun prospect to start with, and it's actually some high potential. Like if you were to ask me, and again, I was not as high on Matt Svanson, but like if you were to ask me if how Mason Burns compares to Matt Svanson a year ago, Mason Burns has better stuff than Svanson had. It's better. Now, Svanson had a lot of development that went on during the 2024-2025 offseason and then during the 2025 season, and Burns will have to replicate that. But this is a really good arm.
At Double A, by the way, and that's where Burns is, going to be here in 2026.
Yeah, exactly, Brian. So Mason Burns is just a perfect prospect to start our list with. Uh, for people who are big into the Cardinals prospects.
All right, so that's a free article. Go read it, and hopefully you'll like what you see and want to read about Matthew Miura at number 49. On one hand, a guy that doesn't have power, and I'm sure you'll talk about that. Under 6 foot outfielder, which the Cardinals seem to collect well. Sixth rounder this year, but other than the power, the guy has a very good all around game. It's just whether you think that power could ever emerge, right?
Yeah, it's all baseball IQ with him. He's a coach's favorite player. He has all of the instincts. People will call his speed elite. I don't think, on the grading scale, 80 being as high as you can go. I don't think it's 80. I think it's probably a 70. You don't go to 75. You don't do 65. You stay on the tens. I think it's probably 70. I don't know if it's exactly 80. And he runs the bases extremely well. He steals bases. He plays a great center field. I think what we're going to see is against advanced pitchers, like at the Double A level. I think we're going to see some of his swing decisions, which is one of his calling cards. He makes good contact within the zone and has really good plate awareness. Makes really good swing decisions. I think we'll start to see that tail off as he gets up the level, especially because he won't have the strength to muscle up against high velocity. But that being said, again in the write up, this is the Cardinals' chance at Stephen Kwan. He's actually a little bit bigger than Stephen Kwan, although I'm sure that he's listed bigger than Stephen Kwan, the outfielder from the Guardians. Go ahead, Brian.
I thought you were very aggressive, even throwing out the names Stephen Kwan and Randy Arozarena, because
Yeah.
I choose to throw out Scott Hurst, and I don't mean that I'm down on him. It's just these sub 6 foot outfielders that don't have any power that can play center. It seems like the Cardinals have picked a lot of them, and a lot of them have fallen by the wayside. On the other hand, we could have been having this conversation about Nathan Church a year ago, and
Yeah.
here he is. He found power as he moved up. So, who's to say?
No, Brian, I think that that's again perfect context because the chance, like this is what the Cardinals want him to turn into. They know that he has the basis, the potential to be Stephen Kwan. But the reason that we have him rated where we have him, because I think you had him at like 45 and I had him at 47, or neither of us were aggressive in ranking him, is because we know exactly as you stated that the best chance he's more likely to be Scott Hurst than he is Stephen Kwan. And hopefully our write-ups are displaying to people, they're informing people that there are really real concerns here as they climb the ladder that they won't be able to get to their potential. But this is what the Cardinals, you feel pretty good that this is what the Cardinals think he can be if he reaches his eventual ceiling.
And one of the things you'll see in there is what I think his future value will be in the major league, what role he'll play, the risk of him getting there, when he'll be Rule 5 eligible, when he might make his major league debut. And of course, a lot of this is extrapolating and making reasonable guesses about what might happen down the road. But it kind of helps put these guys, and most of these guys that we're talking about are future value 35s.
Yeah.
If they reach the major leagues, they're probably going to be an up and down guy. But now and then we get surprised.
Yeah, yeah, and again, Nathan Church. I think Nathan Church is bigger and stronger. I think that he has a more actionable mechanics, but That's not to say in 1.5 years working with player development, working with the really highly acclaimed strength and conditioning staff and the organization, that Matthew Murray and his listed 5'11" frame might be able to put on a little bit of weight and put up Tommy Edman numbers or Stephen Kwan numbers or something like that. Like when you're as athletic as he is and you're as good of a defender, you have a chance at making a major league debut. And we have Mike Golciani off the 40 man and Brian Torres on the 40 man to prove that, along with Victor Scott II.
There you go. And number 48, the article that was posted this morning, Wednesday morning, Ryan Campos, catcher, who had a very, very good debut at Palm Beach in 2024. Not so well, spent the entire 2025 season at Peoria. Had some decent counting stats, but, again, lacks power. And he's a guy that's smallish. I mean, he was listed at 5'8" when he was drafted. The most recently, the Cardinals show him at 5'7". That's a little bit taller than Jose Altuve and a little shorter than the shortest catcher in the major leagues, to my knowledge, which, of course, is Alejandro Kirk from the American League champion Toronto Blue Jays. So, I think you have some other concerns about Ryan Campos that limits his potential reaching the majors. And then it's nothing to do with the fact that there's at least 5 catchers much higher ranked that are ahead of him right now.
Yeah, it really comes down, again, he does 2 things that are concerning. One is he puts the ball on the ground a lot, although I give him a ton of credit because he's worked really hard along with the hitting brass in the organization to get the ball off the ground. And he's actually made strides, not only from his time in the organization in 2024 after getting drafted, but as compared to his time at Arizona.
And here's a stat, I'm going to interrupt again. Here's a stat that supports that. Campos made 421 plate appearances with Palm Beach this year, in 2025. He hit into just 5 double plays all year.
Mm-hmm.
Just 5. And that's, I mean, we're talking about a catcher here, right?
Yeah. And it's probably worth mentioning too that number will probably kick up just a little bit once he gets to a level where he has hitters in front of him on base, which didn't happen all that often at Peoria.
Well, there's another challenge. He was like among the team lead with RBIs was just 47. So
yeah, but no, you're right. Like I think his and Brian, I don't have the numbers, and I'm sorry to the audience, I don't have them in front of me. I've got chicken in front of me, so I don't have numbers in front of me. And but I think his ground ball rate went from like 68% in college in 2024 to like 56 last year, or right
54.
Okay. And that's a huge improvement. Like that was one of the concerns entering the organization. So even like another 4% improvement on that is a solid. And the fact that he had a good second half, that he started to put it together a little bit better in the second half, got the ball on a line a little bit better in the second half. Those are all positives. My other concern about Campos is and again, he's a field general. Everybody loves him. Coaches love him. Pitchers love him. Fielders love him. He communicates well. He's a field general.
Peter Weiss, excuse me.
Without the power potential, which usually means that he's not. So I will say that, again, you don't have his numbers. You don't have the advanced numbers. I've been told that his pop time is about 2 seconds, which is a little slow, and that his arm, everybody says his arm is a rocket. And I have not seen that, and I do not believe that to be true. I've gotten conflicting numbers on exactly what the velocity is out of his pop time. So again, without having solid numbers, without having the proof, I can't really write about that. I can only say what the conjecture is.
Well, here's a data point, and again, this may be the Peoria pitching staff being, slow, not paying attention to runners and being slow to the plate. But his success rate on stolen bases was only 16% this last year, which is not good. And there were 160 attempts against him, which is high.
Yeah. Yeah, and then which brings you to your next thing. He probably doesn't have the bat. Look, he's going to be a catcher because of his intangibles, but he doesn't have the arm to switch to pitcher like Robert Stock, and he has never pitched. And he doesn't really have the bat or the profile athletically to play anywhere else. So he's a catcher, and he makes great contact. He takes really good at bats. He's going to walk as much as he strikes out. That'll continue to happen as he moves up the ladder. It's just that he's limited in every other capability.
So so we're going to continue to roll these out once a day, well into the new year. So keep reading our stories, and we'll recap them some as time allows during our Wednesday podcast. So that was 50, 49, and 48. In other news that happened this week, the Cardinals don't have all their player development people in place yet, but announcements are starting to trickle out. They've allowed some of the new employees to basically announce themselves via social media. And we saw some new. I've been a little bit, I wouldn't say concerned, but I've been less excited about some of the hires to date because they seem to have filled positions that the Cardinals had before and maybe didn't have last year or whatever. That's not the case in the two most recent hires to come out. And that is that they hired a new coordinator for infield. And this is I think their eighth coordinator, eight coordinators, which is a big change. Before they had a pitching coordinator, an hitting coordinator, and some assistants, and that's it. And I'm not even counting assistant coordinators, eight coordinators. And this new one, infielder, Casey Demko, who came from Abilene Christian, um, interestingly, an Ohio native. I don't know if that's coincidence or not, or how his connections came with the Cardinals, but came out of the college ranks to be the infield coordinator. And then there is a former coach at SLU, an assistant named Jason Erie, who is going to be an infield coach. And all I was able to find out is that he's going to be doing work with the affiliates, but that doesn't say whether he'll be signed to a team or whether he'll be a cross organization guy, but that'll all come out in the wash soon. I guess the big couple of things that I'm interested in hearing from you, Kyle. Number one, it sort of continues this trend across baseball that they're bringing more college coaches into the ranks. And number two, this investment in infield. And, to date, Jose Akendo had been it, and certainly he'll continue to be involved, but one man can't do everything.
Yeah, Brian, I'm excited about it. I love the idea that they're bringing in really highly acclaimed people and also people who have gotten results. And you don't know necessarily if those results are just right timing. Sometimes it's right timing, but especially Erie, when you look at some of the progress, and it was in the press release or somewhere I read it, but like
My
he's a really
article, Kyle, you read my article.
Oh, you know what? It must have been your article. Actually, Brian, I think it was your article. Oh my goodness. Look, I've got a dog, I've got chicken, I've got
Oh
a
my
beer.
gosh. One
Uh,
demerit, one
uh,
demerit.
but no, well, that's exactly what it was. But he's a really highly acclaimed coordinator, and he's had a lot of success at the various places he's been. The success has carried him. And sorry, the dog's trying to get the chicken, Brian. We got a whole thing going on here.
Yeah.
But like they've got a ton of success where they've been. They're both young. They're both again, the little bit of research that you've done, they're both good communicators, which has been a huge point of emphasis, continues to be a huge point of emphasis for the organization. And look, it's just exciting. It's exciting to bring people on, and it has me wondering what's coming next, both from a coordinator standpoint and also a just scouting standpoint.
And to your point specifically for Jason Erie, in 2 of his 3 years at SLU, the defense posted 2 of the best fielding percentages in team history. And again, as you said, that's talent, but it's also obviously the coach is bringing out that talent. And
Yeah.
both these guys, Erie, for example, began as a volunteer assistant and worked his way up and became infield coach and first base coach. So he's young and aggressive. I think if I remember right, Demko's only like 28 years old. So these are some young guys that have good experience, but should also be able to relate to the players.
Yeah, yeah, that's it exactly, Brian. Keep bringing them on. Keep bringing on the promising talent, not just within the organization on the diamond for the baseball players and the prospects, also the instructors. I'm excited about it. I think these are good changes. I think these are good additions, and I kind of like where they're all coming from. And again, of course, locally for the St. Louis folks, a SLU Billiken joining the Cardinals coaching staff, even on the minor league level, I think is a positive. I do think, to your point, just to elaborate a little bit more, part of the reason that he hasn't been assigned probably is they haven't they haven't made all their coaching decisions at the minor league level just yet. And
It'll be really interesting if they have an infield coach at each affiliate. I mean,
yeah,
that would be a major investment. And I'm not suggesting that's the case necessarily,
yeah,
but it'll be fun to see. They've definitely built up coordinators. And during the season, of course, those guys are rovers. I mean, they spend some time in the Jupiter complex, but they're out with the teams anyway. But it'll be interesting to see. We're seeing the cross system people put in place. It'll be interesting to see what they do with the team assignments themselves.
really interesting. I can't wait, Brian.
Yeah, me too. And again, there's no date. It's not like non-tender dates or free agent sign or arbitration where there are actually firm dates. It's when the Cardinals feel like they're ready. So I would imagine it'll be done by the time winter warm-up comes around, because that's 2 months from now, and coaches will already be in Florida. So sometime between now and then, we'll see.
Yeah, we have a busy month ahead of us, Brian, one way or the other. I think between here and the winter meetings, we're going to have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and one of the things that, of course, we'll talk about when there's news to talk, and that is changes to the major league roster itself. One of the things that irked me as a prospect guy was the decisions that they made to sign qualifying offer free agents in 2023, 2024, which cost them, and I'm talking about, certainly Wilson Contreras and Sonny Gray have been good Cardinals, among the leaders of the team during their time here. But that cost the Cardinals a second round draft pick each of those 2 years, the two following years, the second round draft pick, plus the money that goes with that pick, which is like $1 million of cap room, plus they lost a $500,000 of international cap money those same years. So the cost to sign one of those free agents is a painful thing for a team that wants to build from within. And so, at one time we hear the Cardinals saying they want to build from within, but then they sign these guys and they hamper themselves both domestically and internationally. To that vein, one of the local media sources generated a discussion that said, hey, given the Cardinals have dropped in attendance and dropped in revenues, if they're revenue sharing participants, they receive revenue sharing from Major League Baseball, that could mean that they would only have to give up a third rounder instead of a second rounder if they signed a qualifying offer free agent. Now, as a reminder, what was the qualifying offer this year? 21
22
million?
and some change, Brian.
22,
22.
22 million. What are the odds that the Cardinals are going to spend enough money to sign a guy who turned down 22 million for 2026? I would say they're not zero because it hasn't happened yet, but it's decimal points after the zero, I think. What do
Yeah,
you think?
Brian, I have two thoughts. The first one is I think back to Heim Bloom's introductory press conference, or I guess his second introductory press conference, the first one in 2025.
The one
Uh,
where he got to actually be the boss.
that's right. Yeah. I think back to that. And he was very candid about saying this organization will not mortgage the long-term health and future for short-term viability. And granted, a third round pick is a third round pick. You're probably drafting, in the 100 range, but they're not going to do that. There's no reason to do that. There's no reason to do that right now when they're trying to build up their farm system from a cost conscious way. There's no reason to do it now when your scouts are kind of rolling. Like they've had a great draft last year. There's no doubt about it. It's not just 89th pick Jack Jurovic. It's not or 89th overall Jack Jurovic. It's
No,
not.
it's Ty Van Dyke, and I know it. I know Ty Van Dyke is your man.
I love a good 10th rounder. I like a good stocky built gentleman, Brian, and I'll say it every episode until you cut me off. But I think see now I want to make an Elton John joke because of last week,
No, we're not. No, not going back there.
uh,
So far, I haven't gotten caught by the police, and I'm hoping it stays that way.
uh, but like you know. They're not going to do something like that. I think about Mr. DeWitt around that same time. Bill DeWitt the second. He also mentioned that part of the reason that they got into the position they were at, and of course, John Mozeliak talked about this before he retired, but part of the reason the organization got where it was at was because they were signing qualifying offer free agents, and they did not have that second round pick. And again, you're talking about a difference of between 30 and 50 picks and a second and third rounder, depending on where you're picking, and blah blah blah, comp picks between the rounds, and but you can still get a really good player and you still get X amount of money. And all of those things are really important for the Cardinals, who we know are not afraid to spend in the sixth or seventh or eighth or ninth or 10th round over slot. Like every dollar counts for the Cardinals. And I think the scouts deserve that opportunity, as does the organization. And, Brian, I know one thing that you and I have talked about in the past, but like, is that player, the other question you have to ask yourself is that player going to want to come to the St. Louis Cardinals in the current condition that they're at? I've heard people talk about Dylan Cease, and like right now, if you're Dylan Cease, the Cardinals aren't going to outbid for you. Why would you go to the Cardinals? You know,
Unless it's the best offer you've got on the table, you're not going to come. For the same
that's it.
reason that Sonny Gray finally admits, yeah, I probably should move on. And last year, folks remember, he didn't want to. He wanted to write it out and see what happened. And he's kind of to the point now where, okay, yeah, I guess I'm going to have to because I'm probably not going to be able to play in the playoffs during my few years remaining, as an active player.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly it. And all those players talk. Sonny Gray is a highly respected player amongst other players. Everybody loves him. Uh, you know,
Very intense, very professional.
Exactly, exactly. So these players talk, it's going to be hard to sell to anybody that, oh yeah, we're trying to trade Wilson Contreras and we are almost certainly going to trade Sonny Gray and Nolan Arenado. But Dylan Cease, come here. Uh, uh, oh, hey, Fernando Tatis Jr., waive your no trade clause. Come here. Like those things they're not going to happen right now. That's not the position that the Cardinals are in. Because of what I just laid out, but also because B, the Cardinals aren't necessarily looking to do that right now. I think they'll be opportunistic, but not in that regard where the player has choice.
To be on the positive side, that doesn't mean that the young players can't get better and the team can't improve. Now, that was the hopes, for 2025, and it didn't happen. But maybe for 2026, if the expectations are set a little lower, the bar set a little lower, maybe they can overachieve and, establish a winning record and, stay in the hunt for a meaningful playoff spot, not the last wild card. But I think you and I both agree, it's going to take a few years until the Cardinals are ready to slug it out for the top of the division.
Yeah. Anything can happen with pitching and good defense. If all of a sudden Eshawn Henderson and Brycen Mautz are throwing 97 consistently and their stuff continues and every pitcher in the organization makes huge strides, yeah, the Cardinals could in 2026 conceivably be fighting for a wild card spot, with just a little improvement from Gorman.
Yeah,
But
and on the pitching side, pardon me for interrupting you again. Have a bite.
Yes.
On the pitching side, it would only be fair after the epidemic of injuries that hit the pitching this last year in 2025. I mean, they're about due for some good things to happen.
I agree, Brian. So, no, aside from that, it's going to be somewhat slow, but I also feel like it's going to be extremely calculated and, communicative and all that stuff. Sorry, Aggie disagrees with me, Brian.
Well, I think that's probably a great way to end our session. When the dog wants to go out, it's time to take the dog out. And with that, yeah, we will conclude the November 19th edition of Wednesday with Walton and Reis. Kyle, thank you very much, and we'll talk to everyone in 7 days.
Thank you, Brian.